Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Rashmita, and I am the event planner for Microsoft Reactor India. The session will run over the next 60 minutes, including Q&A. But before we begin today's session, please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We are all here to learn together, so please be respectful of other people's views, understanding of differences, being kind and considerate in the way you engage. The chat section will be open throughout, and we do encourage you all to participate. So please feel free to drop all your questions in the chat section. I would now like to welcome our speakers for today's session, Rakesh and Mohammad Hamza. Rakesh is a senior solutions architect with over 23 years of experience in designing, developing, and managing enterprise and Microsoft MVP in business applications and Fasttrack recognized solution architect. Our next speaker, Mohammad Hamza, working as a technical consultant as a part of customer success architect team. But for now, let me bring both of the speakers into the stream, and here you go. Good morning to both of you, and welcome to our show. Um, the stage is all yours. I'll be at the backstage, so just let me know if you need any help. But yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Rashmita.
Rashmita.
Right. Good morning. Hello, everyone. Good morning, everyone. So today we are going to talk about our episode 3. So episode 3 is basically a topic where we are going to talk about understanding our learning on the implementation side of invoice capture. In the previous two lessons or previous two episodes, we learn a lot. In the episode 1, we try to cover the what is the entire journey of vendor invoice automation. We also try to understand why the automate vendor invoices, the need of the hour. We also talk about what does the invoice capture do as an automated AI enabled tool for your vendor invoice journey. We also understood the how do you implement the invoice capture, right? In terms of the installation challenges, in terms of the configuration, in terms of and the streamline your business process, and so on and so forth, right? We also talk about the competitive landscapes. There are multiple ISVs out there, and how do you ensure that the ISVs goes with invoice capture, right? So we also discussed at length in the episode 1, and towards the end we also had a detailed demo on the journey of the vendor invoice automation. So that was a quick recap of our first episode in this series of zero to hero invoice capture. In the second episode, we actually delve into the more understanding of the hands-on experience, where we talk about the configuration piece of the invoice capture. We also talked about the standard model versus the custom model, and how do you ensure that in which scenario you need a custom model versus the standard invoice AI model. We also understood the strategy between the AI model and the custom AI model in terms of the cost benefit, in terms of the long term goal, so on and so forth, right? And towards the end we also try to cover the extension part or the customization part of the invoice capture, right? So that's how this episode 2. Episode 3, which is today's topic, where we are going to more focus on navigating the pitfalls while doing the implementation of the invoice capture. This is nothing but our own journey of the implementation, what we learn, what kind of a challenges that we face, right? So, and we wanted to ensure that you learn from those our learning, so that your journey of the implementation of invoice capture will be more smooth. So in terms of agenda today, we're going to first start with the real-time challenges that we typically face when we receive the bulk of invoices from your different vendors. Then we're also going to talk about how the versions that we receive from Microsoft across the invoice capture, and how do you ensure that you have to manage that real-time business challenges with these limitations and the versions limitation that we receive. Then we will also talk about the standard model versus the custom AI model, right? where we will see how do you ensure which model to be preferred. I think quite a bit of portion that we covered in episode 2 as well, but today we are going to go into more detail for that aspect. Then we'll talk about the accuracy of the data mapping, right? When you have the mapping of the data fields across the standard and the custom model, we would see how that accuracy to be maintained while doing that activity in the product. Then we'll also talk about the benefits of the migration tool, where I have seen many scenarios where the existing copies of invoices, how do you migrate those copies of invoices, what capability that invoice capture allow us to do that, we will see that. And towards the end, we will also see the Viva's channel, which is nothing but the superpower for your implementations. One single hub for all your queries, doubts, and everything, right? So I'm going to walk you through those channels. If you are not subscribed, I would highly recommend you to subscribe to channel. But we'll see where to start a journey and what kind of questions that you can go and ask in the Yammer channel or the Viva channels. Okay. And then we also covered the implementation guide, what product ships, what the product team ships, and how to navigate to the implementation guide, and so on and so forth. And if there are any questions, we will try to address those questions towards the end. So that's pretty much we have set for our 45 minutes or 50 minutes or so for today's talk, and last 10 or 15 minutes we will try to see if there are any questions, and we'll try to address those questions. In terms of introductions about myself, so my name is Rakesh Zarge. I'm Microsoft MVP as well as the Fasttrack recognized solution architect in Dynamics 365 ERP. I have been working since last close to more than 20 years in this ERP. I did multiple implementation across the globe, and invoice capture is one of them. Today, I'm joined by my colleague Mohammad Hamza Khan, who is going to cover our couple of topics that we are going to talk about today, and more quiz of the presentation slide. Hamza, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Rakesh. And hello, everyone. I am Mohammad Hamza Khan, and I am a Dynamics 365 technical and generative AI enthusiast. I'm working specifically on invoice capture for a past year. Like since the movement invoice capture, came out, I've been working on it, diving deep into it. And I believe now, since it's been such a long time that even if you wake up someone in sleep and ask me something about invoice capture, I should be able to give you a definitive answer regarding invoice capture. So yeah.
Thank you, Hamza, for your introduction. So now we'll move on to our first slide. But before I go there, I would like to call out one of the important announcements, that probably I need to stop my camera due to the challenges and the bandwidth issue. And I'll come back once I have the right bandwidth for this. Okay. So in terms of our first point, which we are going to cover, the challenges faced in real-time implementations, right? So every implementations come with a lot of challenges, right? So, and there is no surprise that any implementation without challenges that you're going to face. But there are two particular challenges that I would like to call out in today's session. And one of the cases I'm going to also discuss about the case study. We will see in actions how do we manage the configurations to meet that the need of the customer request or the customer requirements by fulfilling that case study. That's how I'm calling that as a case study. It might be helpful for you in your implementations. So one of the aspects that I have learned, when you have the invoice capture, first of all, define your own strategy when you try to implement the invoice capture as an AI powered automation tool for the scanning of the invoices from vendor side. First of all, you have to understand and learn the features that has been provided by invoice capture. What it means that go through the documentation as well as the implementation guide that has been shared by Microsoft. Understand what capability that Dynamics invoice capture allows you to perform, right? And try to map the vendor invoice as its process, automation process with this particular invoice capture solution. And one of the benefit that I have seen, there are many uncovered feature which might your customer is not currently being using because they're completely into the manual processes that you can fully automate it into this end-to-end invoice capture journey. Another learning that I have seen with this approach for this tailor-made, you can define your own tailor-made processes. What it means is that, say for example, customer is currently being using any other ISV solution for invoice capture, but When it comes to the dynamics, that is Microsoft Invoice Capture piece, you will be able to compare what features that Invoice Capture provides out of the box versus the ISV solution, right? And it also helps you to define the end-to-end journey of your tailored made vendor invoice automation journey, right? So that's how you have to focus on the learning of understanding the capture invoice capture capability and the features, and try to map with the business processes. Sometimes you have to come up with your own standard operating processes as well, because as the product evolving, a lot of things are coming up, a lot of things are there in the pipeline. And if you define that roadmap, that is eventually going to help your customer if you define the tailored made business processes for vendor invoice automation, right? And with that, I would like to call out one of the case study where I implemented this invoice capture solution, right? So where when we during the implementation, we were able to simplify the business process with this approach for one of the retail giant outside the India geography, and where we have learned the customer basically wanted to go with the concept of the procurement category. They were receiving the invoices from a different vendors. Couple of invoices they were coming as a PO, as a inventory based item. However, the couple of invoices they were receiving from the procurement categories, right? And there was a lot of juggling between a thought process that how do you ensure that our product ensure the both the categories, that is the procurement category based invoices as well the purchase order line, which is inventory based invoices, right? So then that was a primary requirement from a customer. And when we expect and they understood the requirement from customer, the expectation from customer was pretty clear that the invoices should go maybe 99 to 100% in the system without any errors, without having any kind of some sort of the touchless operation they were expecting, right? So when we understood the product capability of the invoice capture, we were able to explore that feature that Dynamics 365 invoice capture solution offers, where we have configured the PO header lines, the PO header templates, and that allows after the consultation with the definitely with the customer team and some sort of POC and all, we could able to manage the situation where the PO headers were automatically scanned by the copy of the invoice captures, and then the lines will be automatically created. So we will see in that actions once I complete this presentation deck, where my colleague Hamza will try to explain what features that allow us to do that for this automation journey of particular case study that I just talked about. Then I'll move on to the next topic, where very interesting one, right? How do you ensure the version limitation, which translates into the real-time business challenges? As I mentioned in the beginning of the session, that this particular invoice capture is the capture solution that's been building on top of the model-driven app, the Power Apps, right? So it's changing. Microsoft is collecting the information, different customers, partners, and community leaders and a community enthusiasts like you, where they're collecting feedback and they're building the capability on top of that. So there are multiple releases happening, right? But I just wanted to call out the two aspects that I learned in the implementation. One of the aspect is the constant currency code, right? So say for example, you have the different scenarios where the purchase orders being recorded into a multiple currency code, right? So as we speak, invoice capture does support a single currency code, right? There are things in the roadmap we'll get to know from Microsoft very soon, that multiple currency factors and everything, right? But as we speak, it does support the single currency code. What it means that you have either a PO lines, all the PO lines, those are associated with the only the one USD currency, and if you have a euro another currency, you will not be able to segregate and scan that particular invoice automatically. The manual intervention is required. So keeping in mind that you have to have one single currency code attached to the lines, although I do understand it's not the real life business scenario, but yes, you can go with some workaround to deal with this particular aspect of the constant currency code. Another aspect that the learning that I have seen is the single decimal separator, right? What it means that if you are dealing with the different vendors, one of the vendor is coming from maybe US geography, another vendor's information coming from Europe geography, but obvious there will be a two different separators in terms of the decimal separator, right? One is using the dot, another is using the comma, right? So in that case, as we speak, invoice capture does support only one single decimal separator, whether it's a standard AI model or whether it's a custom AI model, whatever the case that you would like to go with based on your business scenario. Just keeping in mind that you have to rely only on single decimal separator, whether it's a dot or comma. There are few things that Microsoft is cooking in their kitchen. Probably we will see soon in upcoming releases. But as we speak, this is the option that Dynamics 365 Invoice Capture does offers. Another point that I wanted to just call out as part of this challenges or the learning that we have seen is the AI portion. So think about a scenario. You have a two different scenario. One of the scenario is where you have the PO invoices that is coming from the vendors, but at the same time the purchase orders that you have recorded is not directly punched into the Dynamics 365. It's being recorded automatically by the third party integration. So maybe third party generating, and that information is being, or any other applications being generated in the PO purchase order, PO purchase headlines, and we are just through the integration channel, we are recording that information into the Dynamics, right? So in that case, when you receive the invoices from the vendor, and you have the PO number that has been associated with the prefix, like for example, PO hyphen 12345, and when you receive the invoice, you have seen a different prefix, or maybe concatenation to the existing PO as a prefix with a different one. In that case, your invoice capture will not be able to read that particular invoice automatically. Why? Because you haven't enabled the concept of the number sequence in the Dynamics 365 finance and operation, and invoice capture does look up for the number sequence that you configure. For an example, in another scenario where you still imported a record from integration channel, but you configured the number sequences with the proper prefix. In that case, invoice capture does have a capability where it removes the prefix and goes with the number of that particular the PO number, and then that PO automatic that invoice or any kind of image that can be imported automatically without having any you know without having any kind of manual intervention. Okay. And just a caution, if this will not work, if you're trying to import a PO from your existing number sequence, it has to be uh, turned on automatic. So just try to make that particular note as we learn from this particular implementation process. With that, I'll take a pause, and I would request my colleague Hamza to share his screen and talk about the core differences between the standard versus custom AI model, and how do you ensure in the product. Okay. Over to you, Hamza.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Yeah. So the thing, let me start initially from where Rakesh has started. So as Rakesh has said, right, what we need to do is we need to tailor our business processes. So what my client wanted, or our client wanted, was he wanted that all the invoices which are coming from Dynamics, they must have a procurement category. Okay. So what would have been the process if we had gone through, that process? We had to go into invoice capture, we had to go into system setups, and within system setups, we had to, map a rule. And within all those rules, we had to manage some expense type. We need to add the number of items and say after, X amount of time they had to they had to map it the X amount of items today, and then after 1 year or 2 year down the line, then they also need to map it such that the accuracy remains 100%. And that would have been a very manual and a very tedious process, because say for example, they have another criteria, and that criteria was even before continuous learnings. And I'm just skimming through all these topics because all of these have already been explained within the last two sessions. So I'm just skimming through this. What continuous learning does is continuous learning, just say for example, you have already implemented a solution, and invoice capture says, okay, this was the wrong invoice, and then you manually corrected it. So the next time when you're going to do it, it's automatically going to be a correct invoice based on what's the learning which it has done on your past patterns. Okay, I'm just skimming through all of this because we have already explained this. Now what my client wanted that, even from the start, the moment the invoice capture solution is up and it's running, there must be no errors. So the continuous learning functionality, although it should be there, it should not be at the forefront. It has to work in the background, and it has to be very subtle. You cannot use it as a main core feature. It has to be very subtle. So what we suggested to our client, we suggested that instead of going to the procurement categories, the invoice lines and everything, what they can do is, let me open an invoice and I'll tell you. Okay, this is a cancelled invoice. Yes, instead of reading all of the services and the cost of the various services, the unit price of the services, what they can read is, they can just read the header. Okay, so as soon as they have read the headers, what about the lines? From where are the lines going to come? We have mapped it over here. So you go into dynamics, you open this up, uh, you go into modules, again accounts payable, and within accounts payable you go into accounts payable parameters. Okay, and within parameters you can see vendors invoice automation. Over here you can see automatic lines creation for the imported invoices. Over here we have turned the toggle on to yes. Okay, and within yes you have two options. You can either take it from the product receipt or the product purchase order. Okay, so the product receipt or the ordered quantity. Usually what happens is, when you have a product purchase order, sometimes it's not received partially, sometimes it's received partially itself. So it's either complete or partial. But when you try to create its product receipt, at that time, your business process should be such that whatever product receipt you are going to create, it should be of the product which you have already received. It should not be a touch based process. It has to be a manual, a physical. If it's a physical goods, then it has to be physical goods. If we have a services, then those services should already been performed, and it should already been done. So that's how you have to tailor your business processes such that the our product and the client's expectations match. Because in the end, the client would have n numbers of expectations, and we can only do n minus one. So to remove that delta of just one, we need to make multiple changes. And that's what Rakesh was trying to say from the first slide. I hope this might be clear. I am also watching the live stream, and I'm checking if there are any questions which you have. You can just upload it on the chat, and I'll be watching it, and I'll respond you as soon as I see this. Okay. So now coming to the next version. So the how does this version limitations work? I can also show you the constant currency code. So what invoice, whenever you upload your invoices, right? Where's our invoice? Yes. It's not going to take, the unit price of rupees 400, which we have shown over here, right? Invoice capture as a, as a completely integrated module within Dynamics 365, it takes the currency symbol from the purchase orders. Okay, if you're doing it for the purchase order, if it's cost invoice, then it will take it from over here. But if it is for the purchase order, then for the purchase order it's going to go into your purchase order. So let's go to our purchase order, or much better, I'll create one. Okay, I'll create a new purchase order. Give it some time. It's a trial environment, and then, it will take some time. Yeah. There you got it. Click on a new purchase order. As you can see, this currency, right? This is from where it actually takes your currency code from here. It does not take it from the invoice. So whatever currency you have, within your invoice, if that does not matches, the purchase orders, then there is going to be a process gap, and we must ensure that this process gap does not exist. Okay. Because if it does exist, then our whole finances will get derailed. Similarly, the case for a single decimal operator. So I'll show this within the custom option, or how you create a custom solution. So if you go within solutions, no, give me, if you go within AI Hub, yes, this should be the correct path. And within AI Hub, I should have a draft version, right? Let's not make change to the public one. Let's make change to the draft one. Okay. Yes. So say for example, by the time, oh, this got finally loaded. Yes. Say for example, let's go back. Next. Yes. I need to add a new number field, right? And my number field is going to name total. Okay, I've added a number field called total. So now for the total, I can only use it as a dot separator or as a comma separator. So within UK and USA, what we generally use the dot separator. Okay, but when you go to other European countries like Germany, France, what they use is they use comma as a decimal separator. So you cannot have both of them. So this is something which you must take care while you're implementing the invoice capture solution, that either it's going to work as a dot or either it is going to work as a comma, because in very niche cases this might be a very important thing. Okay. Then coming to the AI portion. So as you might already know, our invoice capture solution within integrated within Dynamics, it's an AI ERP. Okay. So the secret sauce of all of this is, say for example, you have your invoice. Okay. Where's our invoice? Yes, let's take let's make this our default example, right? So this is our invoice. And over here, as you can see, the purchase number says 000023. Okay. And you have created it within Dynamics using the Dynamics number sequence. So for the number sequence part, how you're going to do it? You are going to go into its parameters, and within parameters you can see the number sequence, and within this number sequence, where's the number sequence for the purchase orders? Okay. So the number sequence purchase order is going to be somewhere else, but we'll take the vendor account number sequence as a reference. I forgot the navigation for the purchase order number sequence. Okay, no worries. So over here, as you can see this number sequence, right? If your number sequence is not set to manual, but before that, let me explain what the secret sauce was all about. Okay, going with the flow, I forgot to explain the secret sauce. Okay, no worries. Within this number sequence, purchase order number. Let's say my client, like on the invoice, the purchase order number comes as Hamza 0023. And when I have enabled the number sequence within Dynamics for the purchase orders, and the number sequence is set to continuous, it's not set to manual. As you can see, if it is set to manual, it is not going to work. We'll come to that part later, why it is not going to work, how it is not going to work, and everything. If it is set to continuous and you have a specific format, what invoice capture does dynamically is that it will remove that Hamza 0023 and it will take the purchase order which was set up using continuous number. So for the continuous number, you have set it to to 00023. Okay, 000 and 23 was the purchase order number. But on the invoice, it was written Hamza 00023. So it will dynamically remove that Hamza part or the suffix part and the prefix part from the purchase order, and it will do it. But the only condition is that the number sequence has to be generated within Dynamics. It has to be continuous. You cannot do something like that. Say, for example, you have imported your invoice purchase order numbers, and then you are trying to, to remove this minute slight change from the invoice and you have on the product. Then it is not going to work. Your purchase order number within the product and your purchase order number on the invoice should match. If you are importing it, or if you have set your the purchase orders manually within Dynamics, uh, if that's the case, then it's not going to work. But say, for example, you have set it to continuous, then that delta of where it has a suffix and prefix, that will automatically be removed from from our product. And I believe that's a very, very unique feature which our product has. Now, coming to something which I recommend to everyone, and I believe I have already said this within the last session, but always prefer the standard model over the custom model for multiple reasons. So the custom model does have its advantages, and there are scenarios where you have to use custom model. The standard model is not going to work. But when you go for a custom model, right, what's going to happen? You have tagged it and everything is done, but say, for example, you have received a new kind of invoice. The invoice format is going to be new. So what you need to do is you would go and then you would need to add those documents through a new collection. You need to make sure that you have a new collection and everything. And then you also need to tag everything, and after all the tagging is done and everything is done, okay, I believe these are not tag. I need to tag it. But since this is what you can, I'll save and close this. I already have a published model, right? Let me show you the published one. So if I go to the published one, I'll edit this as a draft. Okay. So what is going to happen is you would need to redo everything from the scratch again. And sometimes, or in many times, what will happen is the accuracy of your model, which you already have, that is going to get reduced, right? I'll remove this document because we only require 5. So this is a 6 one. Since this is not tagged, I'll remove this as tag, and what I'll do is, what is not there, I'll just say it is not available in the document, and we should be good with this, right? Everything is what is not mapped. The table is not mapped, right? So what I'll do is I'll say this table is not available in the document, and this tagging should be done. Still pending. Okay, one item is remaining. Subtotal, I'll say I'll remove this tag. I'll also remove this tag. Okay, yes, this should be good. I'll save and close. Okay. As you can see, my model now has an accuracy of 92. It's good. But the movement I'll make some changes to it, sometimes this accuracy may fall. So when you go for a custom model and you make any single changes to it, there's a high chance that it is going to impact your accuracy. And today you are going to implement it. What about 2 years down the line? There are multiple things which may change 2 years down the line, right? You may or you may not be there to support the clients after 2 years. So it's usually much better and highly recommended that you go for the standard model only within a minute case. And I'll tell you what's the most important thing when you go for a custom model is, as of today until now, if you need to have credit invoices, like the invoices must be in credit, so the numbers are going to be negative, only and only in such scenarios you go for you have to go for a custom model. Usually for most of the invoices, the standard model is sufficient. And if you have a very, very, what you can say, unique invoices, at that time you can also go for custom model. But it's a globalization, and we don't have that many unique invoices where you need to go for customer. There are scenarios, there are genuine use cases where you have to go for a custom model. Okay, I just saw a comment that of Janet. If my purchase, what if my PO number in invoice has a suffix of -1? How the invoice capture will capture only the PO 00023 and not PO 000231. So if you have a number sequence enabled to continuous, right? What invoice capture will see, it will try to see, how much accurately it can map your purchase orders. Okay. So say for example, you gave it, this score. Where is it? Let me show you. You would have it given a score of confidence score, right? So if it is very confident, then what it will do is it will process it. If it is not confident, then for the first time, your purchase order is going to fail. But since you have enabled the continuous learning, right? These two both things are connected, simultaneously. You have enabled the continuous learning. Use this continuous learning functionality. As you're using the continuous learning functionality, in it, invoice captures understands that that one is not important anymore. It only needs to focus on this part. And this is also, they have also explained it very well within the implementation guide. I'll come to that implementation guide later, Janet. Okay. So they have explained it very well. They have explained it and they have written it out. And that is going to be, anything which is written, guys, is definitely has a lot more, what you can say, it makes a lot more sense, and you have a lot more time than I'll be explaining it, and I'll be taking a lot of time. Instead, you'll just read this document out. We'll come to this document later. Okay. And where was I going before this question? Yes, I was speaking about the custom model. Yes, it's over here. So your accuracy is going to reduce. And for the credit invoice, you have to go for the custom model, because for the standard one, it's still down the pipeline. It will come, but we don't know when it is going to come. Because understand, guys, our invoice capture module, that I believe it's been only an year, and we are only at version 1.8. We have not made it to the version 2. So we are still at the first version. There were multiple things which were which Microsoft has imported directly within this 1 year. There was, within version 1.1, there were many things which were not there, and now if you go, it's a very stable product. Similarly, there's one thing which I forgot to mention, and that is, when you go for a custom model, you miss out on a very important feature. You miss out on a feature of updating this KVPs, the key value pairs. When you go for a custom model, what is going to happen is this option. Now it's not visible because it's still loading and it's a trial environment. But this option is not going to be there when you go with a custom model. What this option does is, say for example, you have an invoice, and within that invoice, your invoice numbers is very unique. Okay, it so you are able to map it on the fly, on the go. This on the fly and on the go now will not feel like much. What you can also do this when you're training the model, right? But when you have actually trained your model, then you have to go back, you have to add those fields and everything. But when you go with this on the fly and on the go, right? So style, then you can see. Let me derive and check, and let me see which model I'm using. Okay. So when you go with the standard, this on the fly and on the go, right? You don't have to do it. Even the client 2 years down the line, they have an invoice, they can map it themselves. They don't need to have any technical expertise when they do it. Any business user or any accountant or any account clerk, he himself can do it. He himself herself, and they can do it. No issues, nothing. Okay. Now, coming to data mapping. So mapping is a very tedious process within the invoices, but it's a very important that you map some of the fields manually instead of relying, to do it automatically. One of such cases is, let me go to the setup. Okay. Within setups, you have an option to manage your channel. Okay. And even within channels, what you can do is, say for example, you have some particular flow, and within that particular flow for X legal entity, this invoices are going to only come into this mailbox. So for Hamza legal entity, it's only going to come into Dynamics mailbox. Okay, Dynamics 365, that's the name of the mailbox. So what I'll do is, anything which flows from Dynamics mailbox to Invoice Capture, I'll map it over here. I'll assign it a legal entity that it's only going to go to Hamza. So now Invoice Capture does not have to, use it. It does not have to scan and then decide which legal entity it has to go dynamically. You have already pre-mapped it, so that's logged. And anything which, certainty is better than probability. Okay, so now it's very certain that your flow is going into Hamza legal entity. It is not going to any other legal entity even by mistake, or you don't need to rely on that continuous learning. You don't need to rely on anything else. It's going into Hamza legal entity. That means it's going into Hamza legal entity. So map it manually. And similarly, say for example, you have a vendor. Let me call my vendor. What should I call it? Yeah, let me take an example of a car. Yeah, let's take the example of Skoda. Okay. So if you go with Skoda, right? Skoda has that, when you search for Skoda, they had that special R on that logo. Or let's say the Jaguar's new logo. Okay. So when you go with that Jaguar's new logo, that's very different, right? Sometimes what Invoice Capture is going to do is, instead of taking the name of the vendor, it takes the name of the vendor from the logo itself. On that logo, one of the Jaguar's new logo, the J is opposite. There's a big slash, and then you have a J. Okay. So it's going to check it, and that does not exist. It's going to get confused. What you need to do is, you need to manually map it. You'll manually map it into legal entities. You'll manually map it. Let me go where discard the changes. Okay. You go into new, and then you'll make a new name. Let's call it Jaguar. Jag. Okay. And then the description is going to be car. When the company names contains J and J slash and J, what you do is you copy whatever the name invoices when you are doing the testing or when you're doing the development of the invoice capture. You copy all of this, and then you paste it as it is, and then you add a legal entity code manually, such that whenever that vendor is going to come, it is going to be mapped to this. Okay. And this you can also this feature of setup system, it's not going to be available to the clerk. It's only being available to the AP admins, and it's not going to be available to the account payable clerk. So to the admin, you can teach them, or you can give them a knowledge KT session of how this is going to work. A transfer session, shall I say, that yes, this is how the flow is going to be. This is how where you have to set it manually. And it's very important because, as I say, certainty is better than a probability. So when it's going to be very certain that the next time this invoice is going to come, it says, okay, J slash J, it directly needs to go to Jaguar. The account number is going to be this. It's going to be this legal entity. So everything is going to be, very subtle, and everything is going to be very smooth. Now, all the processes and everything which we are talking about right now, when the product is actually been working, all these processes are going to go into the background. You'll see directly that invoice is going to come. It is going to come into Dynamics. All this talks of process which we are doing now, that's going to be eliminated from from the user. He or she does not have to worry of what is going to happen. Okay. So I believe this is very important. Okay, the vendor account number is going to be this, and the legal entity number is going to be that, and everything. Similarly, say for example, you have that vendor for two names, two legal entity, right? So what you need to do is you say for this legal entity, for Hamza legal entity, when you see a vendor's name, the J/J, then the vendor account number is going to be this. For Rakesh legal entity, when you see J/J, then the vendor account number can be different. You can also map that. So, so the invoice capture is not going to get confused or everything. If you have manually mapped it, it's very certain, and that's how things are going to be. Okay. So for the interest of time, let me move far ahead. Okay. Yes. Um. Similarly, you have a migration tool. I believe Rakesh should have it on Yammer. Take it from Yammer. What this migration tool is going to do is, this migration tool, say for example, whatever you have prepared during your development or during your testing phase, all those data and all those continuous learnings data and all, everything which invoice capture has learned, that learnings which also be implemented within production. So when you deploy everything, you don't have to start from scratch. You can directly migrate it. You don't need to worry about it. Okay, you don't need to worry about that continuous, from all these learnings and all these steps and all this error correction which I have done within my testing environment and every other environment. You don't need to worry about that. Okay, you can directly do it from the migration tool. And also one last thing which I'll say is, when you're going to migrate it, right, always export the mappings which you have done. Keep it somewhere else, such that if anything, or if you have any issues, you'll have a safe copy of those actions. Because this mapping, you do it manually, it's a very tedious process. If you have less number of days, you will have a higher number of team. um you know if by any chance you miss this mapping, and you are unable to transport this mapping, it it will have a huge impact on the timeline. Trust me, guys, it does have a huge impact on timeline, and I'm speaking from experience. uh yes. And after this, I believe Rakesh should explain you all about Yammer and what Yammer is. Over to you, Rakesh.
Thank you, Hamza, for such a wonderful presentation and the slide that you covered. I hope the team is going to really learn from it and try to implement in their implementation process. Okay. Now let's understand the our last slide, where we're going to main focus on the superpower which we call as Microsoft Viva channel, formerly known as Yammer, and the implementation guide. Right. So when we start our implementation journey, right, as I mentioned beginning of the call, right, we need to also understand what product features that Dynamics Invoice Capture as a solution offers, right. And often it is very important to understand those features and map it with the product processes or your custom processes that customer is using, and try to see how you can leverage that and come up with your feed gap analysis, or for that matter come up with some sort of POCs and all those sort of things. So there are two things that we learn a lot in our implementation. One is a Yammer channel. Second one is the product team that has been connected with the through this Yammer channel. So any questions that you try to share, you can easily get the answer to it, whether it's available in the product or some understanding gap from your side, or something is not there in the product and you wanted to see cover, understand as a new feature capability. So that's the best opportunity for you to subscribe for this Viva channel known as Invoice Capture. I'll show in actions once we complete this presentation. Second, I would highly recommend you try to share your experience through different channels, whether it's a community blogs or whether it's a community user group sessions, so on and so forth, right? So that others can also learn from your experience as this product is evolving. It is going to be beneficial for both the party, right? One, definitely for product team from Microsoft side, so that they will understand what the scenarios on the ground that we as the implementation partner is facing or customer is learning from it. Second, the person like you as an implementation consultant, right, also learning a lot in terms of what capability can be configured. So the return on the investment of that particular invoice capture, as well as your end-to-end, the timelines for this invoice capture implementation can be reduced. Okay, that's a ultimate goal by sharing your screen, or the sharing your experience with the others, right? Another point that I wanted to highlight, that the implementation guide. So any changes that happens to the product, any versions, Microsoft team, from product team side, they always try to update the PDF version of the implementation guide, which not only talks about the installation piece, but also does talk about bunch of scenarios, bunch of configurations, mechanisms, and so forth. So without much further delay, I'll try to share my screen. Okay, and then we will see that in action. I hope my screen is now visible. So when you log in into the Yammer, right? So this is the landing page. This is a landing page where you would see a multiple channels, and based on your interest and based on your the implementation challenges, you can register for it. I registered for this particular one because I was going through initial lot of understanding gap and what product offers and so on and so forth, right? So one of the channel that I have subscribed for it, which is the invoice capture for Dynamic 365 Finance, okay, where you can have multiple options. Either you can raise the questions, you can raise the polls and etc, and within a few seconds a product team will try to address. And also the community teams, those who are really enthusiastic people, those are working on, if they have faced any kind of a challenges, you will see bunch of questions that are being asked and bunch of questions that have been addressed within a few seconds of time. So I would highly recommend you to go through this channel and try to stay ahead of what you're trying to achieve, or try to stay ahead of what Microsoft is publishing, whether it's in private preview or public preview or any kind of features, right? So I would highly recommend to registered for it, or subscribe for this channel, and leverage and enhance your learning as far as the invoice capture is concerned. Another point I just wanted to highlight is the implementation guide, right? So to download the implementation guide, you can navigate to the axos.microsoft.com, look up for the tool called invoice captures. When you find for invoice capture, navigate to the tab called details and support, and then you will find the option called link for implementation guide. When you click on this implementation guide, the latest version that you would see 1.8.0 with some release numbers, you will find all the options that you wanted to. First of all, start with the document history, the release note, entire installation piece, a lot of the channels and the definition of the channels, and how do you ensure, including the security aspect, also the configuration aspect, which Hamza has covered in today's topic as well as the episode 2. And also it has a lot of options to define the mapping rules and everything, right? You can also see what information that you can leverage from the received file and the documentation file perspective, as well as you'll also see a lot of information. How do you see the side-by-side viewer for capturing the invoices, your dimension, end to end, I would say kind of a single stop for everything if you want to learn the invoice capture, right? So I would highly recommend you go through it and try to see what has been shipped into the multiple versions, as well as the entire journey of invoice capture. In fact, it does have the capture, it does capture the information of how do you import the solution, how do you do the custom AI model, and how do you extend the product, right? So I would again highly recommend you go through this, download it. Whenever any announcement happens for the new releases, you would see that announcement is happening here on a platform, on an invoice capture for Viva channel, and then you can immediately download the file and understand what has been shipped by the month, so that you can start doing that analysis for your custom or tailored made sort of information that you're working with the customer. So that's all for today. I can see only one question from Janet, which Hamza has already answered it. I don't see any further questions. I think we'll take a pause today, and that's how our end of series Zero to Hero in Invoice Capture. We would highly recommend you to look up for the next announcement where we will publish all the episode on our YouTube channels, as well as the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel, as well as our LinkedIn handle, that is mine and Hamza as well. And happy to connect again if you have any questions, any doubts. Happy to share our learnings with all of you. So with that, I'll take a pause. Hamza, would you like to say thanks to everyone?
Hello, Janet. Yes, you can have the implementation document within. If what you need to do is you need to go into App Source. Okay, go to App Source, click on this, click on Invoice, search for Invoice, and within Invoice, click on Invoice Capture for Dynamics 365 Finance. As soon as you're going to click it, you can see it in the details and support link. Okay, you can download it, you can use it. It's no issues. I believe that should answer your question.
Or you can always connect with us via LinkedIn. We will share the link for the download, and you can download it, Janet.
Yeah, even that works. And thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time and patience. I believe this concludes our invoice capture journey. And thank you, Microsoft Reactor team, Rakesh, for collaborating with me. And yes, it was a
Thank you.
wonderful
Thank
time.
you.
I enjoyed it. I hope you also
Thank
enjoyed it.
you.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank you.
Rashmita
Thank you.
Par. Thank you for
Thank
giving
you.
us an opportunity to
Bye.
talk. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rakesh and Mohammed Hamza, for hosting this session. And thank you all for joining us today. Please visit Microsoft Reactor website for more upcoming sessions. Also, we would appreciate your feedback on today's session as it will help us to curate future sessions. So please scan the QR code and do share your feedback. Today's event ID is 23862. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.